"You're not from around here, are you?" The judge chuckled as the courtroom burst into muffled laughter. The girl, standing at the defense table, 16-year-old Amira Lewis, tightened her grip on her crumpled legal pad. Her accent, a rich blend of New Orleans Creole and Southern drawl, had just been turned into the courtroom's punchline. What the judge didn't know was that Amira had read over 400 legal cases in the past 18 months. What the lawyers didn't expect was that the teenage girl representing herself would find a loophole in the prosecution's argument that not even the district attorney's office had seen. What the world didn't predict was that this case would be written into legal journals as "The Day a Teen with an Accent Redefined Justice." This isn't just a story about race, or class, or even justice. This is a story about how they underestimated the wrong girl, and how she turned a courtroom built to silence her into her stage. Stay till the end, because the moment that judge goes silent is the moment Amira redefines what a defendant can be. The sirens were the first thing Amira Lewis heard that afternoon, high-pitched, panicked, and out of place in her quiet New Orleans neighborhood. She'd just stepped off the school bus, her backpack heavy with textbooks, and a folded-up paper the results of her mock trial presentation marked with a bright red A+. Amira wasn't like most 16-year-olds. While others scrolled TikTok for fun, she devoured YouTube lectures on criminal law. While her classmates dreaded public speaking, she thrived during debate. But none of that mattered the moment two white officers stepped out of the squad car, eyes scanning the block until they landed on her. Her mother, a nurse, had just pulled into the driveway. Her younger brother, Jalen, waved from the porch holding a basketball. And Amira, confused but composed, froze when one of the officers approached. Amira Lewis. "Yes, sir. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice." The handcuffs clicked shut before she could ask why. Jalen dropped his ball. Her mother screamed. At the precinct, no one explained anything, at least not in full. Amira was booked, fingerprinted, and photographed. The charge, tampering with a federal investigation. Turns out, the neighborhood mechanic, Mr. DeMarcus, a kind man who'd fixed their car for years, was under investigation for allegedly selling stolen car parts. A week earlier, Amira had helped him write a formal complaint letter to the police accusing another shop of planting evidence. She hadn't touched any evidence. She hadn't lied. She'd simply helped him articulate his side. But someone at the DA's office thought that was enough to charge her. In the interrogation room, a suited man with slicked-back hair entered. He was Assistant District Attorney Cullen Griggs. "You're a smart girl, huh? Writing letters like you're a lawyer. I just helped a friend who didn't know the right words. That friend's now a suspect. And thanks to you, his case got more complicated." Amira looked him straight in the eye. "That's what the truth does, sir. It complicates lies." Griggs raised a brow, then smirked. "This'll be quick. You'll plead out, get probation, maybe a few community hours. Stay in school and no one will even remember." But Amira said 4 words that stopped him cold. "I want a trial." The room went silent. He scoffed. "You want a trial? You're not even 18. You don't even have a lawyer." She reached into her backpack, still sitting on the table beside her, and pulled out a tattered copy of Gideon v. Wainwright. A case she'd studied, memorized. "The Sixth Amendment gives me the right to counsel. But if I choose to waive it, I can represent myself. Isn't that correct, sir?" Griggs leaned back. Something in his face shifted from amusement to concern. Amira was released on bail, but her world had already changed. At school, whispers followed her in the hallway. Is she really going to trial? She's just doing this for attention. She talks so weird, like, what even is that accent? Even some teachers pulled her aside. "Amira, sweetheart, you're a brilliant girl. But don't be foolish. The court system isn't made for people like us." But she'd already made up her mind. She'd grown up watching her mom work 12-hour shifts to put food on the table. She'd read cases of black teens railroaded through the system, pushed to plead guilty for crimes they didn't commit. She wasn't going to be one of them. Late that night, she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by old laptops, borrowed law books, and printed pages covered in neon yellow highlights. She wasn't preparing to survive this trial. She was preparing to win it. And in a courtroom that had already laughed at her voice, she was about to make them listen to her words. The courtroom was colder than Amira expected, sterile, too bright, and echoing every shuffle of a paper like thunder. She walked in alone. No lawyer by her side, no flashy suit, just her school blazer, her mother's old pearls, and the confidence of someone who'd spent every night for 2 weeks reading Louisiana criminal procedure. A few heads turned. One attorney nudged another. The whispering started before she even reached the defense table. That's the girl. She's repping herself. What is this, a school play? But Amira stood tall, her legal pad clasped to her chest like a shield. She looked up toward the bench where Judge Lionel Huxley peered down at her through his reading glasses. He was in his 60s, sharp-featured and known for cutting through nonsense, or in other words, intolerant of anything that disrupted his courtroom's image of authority. He adjusted his robe and leaned forward. "Miss Lewis, I was told you've declined legal counsel. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor, and you intend to defend yourself in this matter." "That is correct, sir." Then came the pause, the look, and the smirk. "Where are you from, young lady? I'm having a bit of trouble understanding your dialect." The room chuckled, soft at first, but unmistakable. A few jurors shifted uncomfortably. Amira blinked, then cleared her throat. "I'm from New Orleans, sir. Lower 9th Ward, born and raised." I see the judge said, suppressing a grin. "Well, just try to keep things clear for the record, will you?" That moment would later trend on TikTok, with over 4 million views captured on a reporter's live stream and captioned, "Judge mocks teen's accent in open court." She silences him later, but Amira didn't flinch. She turned to face the jury and introduced herself again. "Good morning, my name is Amira Lewis. I stand before you, not just to defend myself, but to uncover the truth, and I promise by the time this trial ends, you'll understand every single word I say." The prosecutor, ADA Cullen Griggs, strutted to his side of the courtroom like a man stepping onto a stage he owned. He began with a dramatic monologue. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not complicated. A suspect tried to avoid prosecution by manipulating a minor. That minor inserted herself into a legal investigation, obstructed justice, and we have proof. Her fingerprints, her statement, her arrogance." He turned to Amira. "This isn't a debate club, Miss Lewis. This is court. You'll learn the difference soon enough." Amira scribbled something on her legal pad, then raised her hand. "Permission to respond, Your Honor." Judge Huxley raised a brow. "This is opening statements, Miss Lewis, not an argument." "Understood, sir. I'll keep it clean." She walked slowly to the jury box and smiled, nervous but resolute. "Mr. Griggs is right about one thing. This isn't a school debate, but it's also not a place for twisting the truth into something it's not." She held up a photo, the original complaint letter she'd written for Mr. DeMarcus, the one the DA had submitted as evidence. This letter didn't tamper with anything. It documented a concern. It didn't hide the truth. It tried to uncover it. She turned, looked directly at Judge Huxley. "And for the record, sir, I'll keep my accent, but I'll make sure you can follow along." A quiet gasp. The courtroom held its breath. For the first time since she'd walked in, the judge said nothing. Back in the hallway during recess, Amira sat alone on a bench reviewing notes. But not for long. A young intern white mid-20s badge reading Legal Clerk McCary approached hesitantly. "Hey, that was gutsy. What you said in there." Amira looked up. "Thanks, I meant it. Listen, I'm not supposed to say this, but Judge Huxley's got a record. He's been called out before for bias, but no one ever challenged him in court. She stared at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you might be the first person who actually knows how to win. Amira didn't smile. Not yet. She just looked down at her legal pad and circled the next line in her outline. Challenge the suppression of key evidence on Day 2. She was just getting started. Day 2. Court resumed promptly at 9:00 a.m. and Amira was already seated at her table, papers neatly stacked, hair pulled into a tight bun, and eyes locked on the prosecution's file with unshakable focus. Cullen Griggs, ever confident, strutted in 5 minutes late holding a large manila folder. As he walked past Amira, he muttered under his breath, "Enjoy your last morning in court, kid." She didn't even blink, because that morning, in the quiet hours before sunrise, Amira had found something buried in the discovery files, a contradiction so clear, so obvious that she wondered how no one else had caught it. She was about to use it. Judge Huxley called the court to order, voice flat and firm. "Mr. Griggs, you may proceed with your witness." The prosecution's first key witness was Officer Darnell Mitchell, one of the 2 arresting officers. A tall, stone-faced man with years of experience and a calm demeanor. Griggs led him through his testimony. "You were called to investigate possible obstruction in the DeMarcus case, correct?" "Yes, sir." "And when you arrived, what did you find?" Ms. Lewis had drafted a letter accusing a separate garage of planting evidence. "We found it misleading and believed it could jeopardize the investigation." He then turned dramatically to the jury. "There you have it. A teenager injecting false information into a federal probe." Then came Amira's moment. She stood, stepped forward, and asked, "Officer Mitchell, do you recall the exact time of my arrest?" "Yes." 4:47 p.m. "On March 14th, and when was the complaint letter submitted to the precinct earlier that same day?" "Around 2:15 p.m. She walked back to her table, picked up a printed document, and held it high. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit D security footage, time-stamped 2:45 p.m. from K&G Auto, showing Mr. DeMarcus handing in the complaint letter while I was still in class." Gasps filled the room. Judge Huxley adjusted his glasses. Griggs's expression darkened. Amira pressed on. "So, Officer Mitchell, if the letter was submitted without me present and I was still at school at the time, how exactly did I insert myself into the process?" "Well," he said, "you helped him write it. Did you see me give him the letter? Hear me make a statement? Find any communication between me and the other garage?" Mitchell hesitated. "No, ma'am." Amira turned to the jury. "That's because there wasn't any. And yet, I'm the one on trial." Griggs immediately objected. "Your Honor, this is speculative, overruled," Huxley said sharply. "She's pointing out a discrepancy in your timeline, Mr. Griggs. You may respond during redirect." But Griggs looked cornered. His witness had just confirmed that the timeline didn't align. And worse, Amira had done it with calm precision, no theatrics, no stumbling. At recess, reporters were now hovering outside the courthouse, scribbling into notepads, some filming TikToks with captions like, "Teen Prodigy Destroys Prosecutor's Opening Argument Live in Court." Her mother hugged her tightly by the vending machines. "Baby, you just turned that courtroom upside down. I had to. They built their whole case on a lie." Her mom pulled back. "I'm proud of you, but be careful. They're not used to being challenged like this, especially not by someone who sounds like you. Looks like you." Amira nodded, jaw clenched. "Let them be uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable my whole life." Back in court, Griggs called his next witness, forensic analyst Rachel Nguyen. Calm, smart, data-focused. "Miss Nguyen, can you confirm that Amira Lewis's fingerprints were on the letter?" "Yes, on the back page." Amira stood again. "Ma'am, would you agree that holding a paper, reading it, or reviewing a draft could all lead to fingerprints appearing?" "Yes, that's standard." And did the letter contain any handwriting or language that you personally analyzed as deceptive? I'm not trained in deception profiling, just forensics. So you can't say I lied, just that I touched the paper. Correct. Amira smiled slightly. That was all she needed. Judge Huxley dismissed the witness. The jury looked increasingly uneasy. Amira had done more than poke holes. She'd made a pattern, a faulty timeline, a lack of motive, a legal system leaning on assumption, and she wasn't done yet. The courtroom was noticeably tenser when court resumed that afternoon. Even Judge Huxley sat more rigidly in his chair, occasionally glancing at Amira as if she were a fire that wouldn't go out. The prosecution looked rattled. But Amira, she was just getting warmed up. Griggs cleared his throat and called his next witness, Detective Hank Palmer, the lead investigator in the DeMarcus case. A veteran officer, gray buzz cut, southern drawl. He carried himself like someone who expected his word to be taken as law. Detective Palmer Griggs began tell us how you concluded Ms. Lewis interfered with your case. When we found that complaint letter, I asked DeMarcus where it came from. He said, Amira helped me write it. That was enough for me. Griggs nodded. And what did you do next? Charged her. We've seen this kind of thing before. Someone with a sharp tongue tries to throw sand in the gears. And in your opinion, she wasn't just helping, no, sir. She was stirring trouble. Amira rose slowly, her notes folded tightly in her hand. She walked toward the witness stand, her voice steady. Detective Palmer, are you familiar with the Miranda warning? Of course. Would you consider it important? Absolutely. Then why, she asked, holding up a printed transcript, did your department fail to give one to Mr. DeMarcus when he was first brought in for questioning? That was an informal talk, but he was in custody, wasn't he? Technically, yes. So you questioned him without reading his rights. A beat of silence. Objection, Griggs barked. Relevance overruled. Judge Huxley muttered, though his tone was no longer smug. It was strained. Amira continued. Detective Palmer, is it standard practice to skip procedure when the suspect is black? The courtroom stiffened. Someone gasped audibly. What? Palmer leaned forward, his face flushed. Because the ACLU report from last year found your department violated search and seizure protocols in 27% of cases involving black suspects, compared to just 5% for white suspects. She held up the report. Did you think no one would read it? Palmer stammered. That's those numbers don't tell the full story. Then tell it, she said sharply. Because from where I stand, it looks like you saw a black man asking for help and assumed he was guilty, and a black girl with a pen and assumed she was dangerous. Judge Huxley banged his gavel. Miss Lewis, you are approaching a line. She turned to him. Your Honor, this entire case is built on assumptions. The prosecution has no evidence I broke the law. Just a feeling. And now we're seeing where those feelings come from. He didn't respond. Because in that moment, Amira had pulled the entire room into a mirror and made them look. During the lunch break, local news vans pulled up outside the courthouse. Reporters were interviewing bystanders. Her name was trending on X, formerly Twitter. The caption that went viral, she's 16, no lawyer, and she just exposed racial bias in court. Back inside, Amira sat quietly at her bench, her mom by her side now. The woman had taken the afternoon off from the hospital, unable to stay away any longer. You're scaring them, her mother whispered with a smile. Good, Amira replied. They've scared us long enough. Griggs tried to recover and redirect, but the momentum had shifted. He asked Palmer about protocol, tried to redirect attention to the fingerprints again, but it landed flat. The jury was watching Amira now. Not him, and Judge Huxley. He didn't smile once the entire afternoon. After court adjourned for the day, a group of law students from Tulane approached Amira on the courthouse steps. We've been watching the live stream, one of them said. You're doing what half our professors wish they had the guts to do. They're scared to call it what it is, another added. You didn't flinch. You're not just defending yourself, the first student said. You're defending every kid who never got the chance. Amira didn't know what to say, so she said the only thing she truly believed. Then I better not lose. Courtroom Day 3. There was a murmur of anticipation as everyone filed in. By now, the courthouse was full, not just with legal personnel, but students, activists, even professors who had come to see the black teen who'd outmaneuvered trained attorneys 2 days in a row. But Amira felt it in her gut today was different. Something was coming. Griggs stepped to the center of the courtroom with unusual swagger, like a man holding a secret weapon. Your Honor, the prosecution calls. Miss Yolanda Bellamy to the stand. Amira's head snapped up. Yolanda Bellamy, one of her former teachers, her freshman year English teacher, the one who once told her, "You'll go far if you learn to sound less Southern." Amira's stomach dropped. Her mom clenched her hand. Miss Bellamy entered wearing a crisp blazer and that tight-lipped smile Amira knew too well. Griggs' voice dripped with confidence. Miss Bellamy, would you describe the defendant as argumentative in school? She was bright, the teacher replied, but often confrontational, always challenging the material. Sometimes disrespectful. Griggs nodded. In your professional opinion, would you say she's capable of manipulating adults? She's very persuasive. In fact, I had to discipline her multiple times for speaking out of turn. She often thought she was smarter than the adults around her. Amira stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. She could feel the jury watching her, wondering if this version of her was the real one. Griggs turned to Judge Huxley. We believe this pattern of behavior, this need to outsmart, is relevant to motive. Amira slowly stood. Objection, Your Honor. That's not motive. That's character assassination. Sustained, Huxley replied, surprising even Griggs. Still, the damage was done. Or so they thought. Amira took a moment before beginning her cross-examination. She didn't attack. She didn't raise her voice. She told a story. Bellamy. Do you remember the day you asked me to read aloud from To Kill a Mockingbird? Vaguely, yes. And do you remember stopping me mid-sentence to say, try to sound more educated, Amira? Bellamy looked nervous. The jury shifted again. I may have said something to that effect. Do you remember what you assigned me after I wrote an essay connecting the justice system in the book to the lives of Trayvon Martin and Khalif Browder Silence? You gave me a C-, with a comment, too emotional. Not objective enough. Amira turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this woman was brought here to paint me as disruptive. But all I ever disrupted was comfort. The comfort of teachers unwilling to face the truth their students lived every day. She pointed to Ms. Bellamy not angrily, but firmly. You say I was argumentative. But isn't that what we teach students to be? To think critically, to ask questions. She stepped back, her voice calm but unwavering. If my crime was being a black girl who refused to stay quiet, then yes, I'm guilty. The courtroom fell silent. Even Judge Huxley didn't interrupt her. Griggs tried to recover. Redirect Your Honor, no, Huxley said. I think we've heard enough from this witness. In the hallway after recess, a woman in a business suit stopped Amira. She looked older, poised, and wore a Yale Law School pin on her lapel. That was surgical, she said. The way you dismantled her without raising your voice. Amira blinked. You're with the press, no. I'm with the Innocence Project. We've had our eyes on this trial. If you ever want a mentor, call me. She handed over a card. Amira tucked it into her pocket without a word. She didn't smile. Not yet. Back inside, Judge Huxley called a short recess. He looked thoughtful. Not cold, not angry. but like a man who'd just realized the storm in his courtroom wasn't going away. The trial was shifting. The prosecution had tried to shame her with her past, but all they'd done was remind the jury why she had to fight. By the fourth day of trial, the courtroom was packed. Every seat, every aisle. Reporters elbowed for standing space. Professors sat in silence, students took notes as if watching a master class. Even Judge Huxley seemed to sit a little straighter. Amira knew what today was: closing arguments. And the stakes couldn't be higher. She'd spent the night at the dining room table, not sleeping, not eating, just revising, rewriting, rehearsing. Her mom had fallen asleep on the couch nearby, still in her scrubs, murmuring prayers under her breath. Amira had never prayed much. But this morning, before entering the courthouse, she whispered one line into the air: "Let them see me." Griggs went first. He stood in the center of the courtroom suit, crisp voice heavy with authority. "This case may have gone off course, folks," he began, "but don't be fooled. This is about a teenager who interfered in a criminal investigation. Period." He turned to the jury. "She's smart. That's not on trial. She's articulate. That's not on trial. What is on trial is her behavior." Then he said it. And if we let clever words overshadow clear violations, we set a dangerous precedent. He glanced at Amira. "Don't be swayed by theatrics. Don't confuse confidence with innocence." Then he sat. Judge Huxley turned to her. "Ms. Lewis, you may begin your closing." She stood up slowly, walked toward the jury box, but instead of speaking immediately, she pulled a chair, the exact kind she'd sat in when she was arrested, and placed it right in front of them. She sat down, crossed her legs, looked every juror in the eye. This is where I was when 2 officers told me I had broken the law. A teenager, just home from school, backpack still on my shoulders. She reached into her bag, pulled out the original letter, the one she helped write. "This is the crime according to them." She held it up, voice shaking not from fear but from conviction. Words. These words, not violence, not deceit, not destruction, just words spoken on behalf of someone who couldn't find the right ones. She stood and paced, now gaining rhythm. You've heard them call me manipulative, argumentative, arrogant, but what they haven't proven is guilt. She paused. They gave you fingerprints, but no context. They gave you a timeline, and I shattered it. They gave you witnesses, and I showed their bias. They gave you fear, hoping it would look like fact. Then she stepped forward closer than ever. I don't want sympathy. I want clarity. I want you to ask, why is she here at all? Because if the only reason is that I used my voice, then I'm not the one on trial anymore. The system is silence, no rustling, no coughs. Even Judge Huxley looked away, jaw tense. Amira returned to her seat without another word. The bailiff called for a short recess before deliberations. Outside the courtroom, a dozen people were crying. A local journalist tweeted, "I've covered trials for 15 years. Never have I seen a teen move a courtroom like this. Never have I seen a judge this quiet. Never have I seen justice feel so close." Amira Lewis. In the jury room, they deliberated for nearly 3 hours. Some argued for caution. Others repeated one sentence: she didn't do anything wrong. Meanwhile, Amira sat in a side room with her mother sipping water she could barely swallow. "Whatever happens," her mom whispered, "you didn't just defend yourself." "What if it wasn't enough?" Amira asked. Her mom touched her cheek. "Then it means they weren't ready to hear the truth, but you still said it." The bailiff returned. It was time. The verdict was in. Amira stood, hands trembling now for the first time, not from fear of the system, but from how close she'd come to breaking it open. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear a paperclip drop. Every camera was fixed on Amira Lewis, this black teen who had stood alone against the legal system for 4 straight days. Judge Huxley returned to the bench, adjusting his robe with slow, deliberate movements. His face was unreadable. "Will the defendant please rise?" Amira stood. So did her mother beside her. The jury foreman, a middle-aged black man with gray temples and kind eyes, held the verdict slip with both hands. In the matter of the state of Louisiana versus Amira Lewis, he inhaled. "We, the jury, find the defendant." A long pause. Not guilty. There was no immediate cheer, just stunned silence, and then a ripple of emotion. Gasps, applause, tears. Amira's knees nearly buckled, but her mother caught her before she fell. "You did it," her mother whispered, breathless. "You really did it." Griggs clenched his jaw, gathered his folders, and stormed out of the courtroom. No eye contact, no rebuttal. Just a man who knew he'd lost not just a case, but his credibility. Even the bailiff looked shaken. Judge Huxley cleared his throat. "Let the record show that the defendant is acquitted of all charges. This court is adjourned." He banged his gavel. But just as he was about to stand, Amira stepped forward. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "may I say one final word for the record?" He looked at her, tired, perhaps humbled, then gave a small nod. "Proceed." Amira turned to face the room, not the judge, not the lawyers, but the audience, the court of public opinion that had watched her rise from a handcuffed teenager to a voice of reason. This wasn't just about me. This was about every black student told to speak differently, every girl told to stay quiet, every neighborhood told they're too poor to fight back. She looked at the judge now directly, and to anyone who still thinks an accent makes you less intelligent, or that confidence means you're out of line, I hope you were listening. Then she sat down, and for the first time, Judge Huxley nodded. Not a smirk, not a scoff, a real, restrained nod. Outside, the courthouse steps erupted into applause as Amira emerged. Local news anchors surrounded her. "Amira, what's next for you? Will you pursue law? Do you realize what this means for young people across the country?" She didn't have a rehearsed speech, just the truth. "I walked in here alone, but I'm walking out with 1,000 voices behind me." And then another voice cut through the noise. "Amira." She turned. It was Detective Palmer, the same officer who testified against her. He wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a plain jacket. His face was softer now, less certain. "I want to apologize," he said. "I didn't see you clearly until today." Amira looked him in the eyes. "You didn't see me because you weren't looking." And she walked away. Back home, her little brother Jalen had decorated the living room with paper signs, "You won, smarter than all of them." The real judge. She laughed for the first time in days. That night, Amira sat on her porch, a warm breeze brushing her face. Her phone buzzed with thousands of notifications. A DM stood out, "Harvard pre-law program we watched. We're impressed. When you're ready, let's talk future." She closed the app, looked up at the stars. For the first time in her life, the world felt a little bit smaller, and her voice somehow louder.